So there's an idea of embracing being an amateur at things, and I fully believe that was one of the greatest gifts I ever gave myself, especially as it pertains to trek cycling. And when I came into this discipline, I came from a road cycling background, and I knew absolutely nothing about trek cycling, but I knew it was something I always wanted to try. I'm getting ready for a workout, by the way. And because of that, the learning curve I knew was going to be incredibly steep. But fortunately, I had a friend, Mike Dansell, that helped guide me on this new journey of mine. But more importantly, it took I'd say a leap of faith in trying to put myself out of my comfort zone into a place where I knew nothing about a sport, about a discipline. I knew something about cycling. I was a bike racer. But more importantly, making yourself vulnerable, putting yourself in a position where you're not an expert or even close to an expert and a complete newbie. And then taking the steps after that to learn as much as you can and enjoying and embracing that journey. Most people won't put themselves in that comfort zone. I'd come from a fairly decent road racing background. It was decent locally. It was never going to be anything nationally. But it was a very safe and comfortable thing for me to do, activity for me to do, because I could race locally within an hour of where I lived, where track cycling was going to be a 3.5 hour, 4 hour drive and time away from the family and everything else. So the commitment was massive in my case. And I had to be sure that I really wanted to go on that journey. And I'm glad I did, because so much was learned along the way. So a great part of that journey of mine is the fact that I embrace being an amateur, and I started from the very bottom. And the great thing about starting at the bottom is you have a lot to learn, and because you're learning, you don't create any bad habits, or at least you try to correct some bad habits you had. And along from starting your journey from the bottom is you learn humility, or if you don't learn humility, you're probably not going to get very far. And that's why one of the best parts of embracing being an amateur is learning humility. Because if you don't have it, that's one habit you really need to break. Because humility is, or lack of humility is, in my opinion, one of the reasons why people don't achieve their maximum potential. It's hubris, it's that lack of humility, it's this putting yourself in a position where you don't want to take advice. But if you embrace being an amateur, you'll welcome that advice. You'll be grateful for it. And that's the other thing, is approaching being an amateur with gratitude and recognizing how far you've come and how far you need to go and how far you've come. And that this is where taking stock in reminding yourself the breadth of that journey really helps. And in my case, since I'm a bike racer, in the United States, one of the benefits of being a bike racer and part of USA Cycling is your racing resume, which is all of your race results in USA Cycling sanctioned events listed. There's some gaps in it because of some changes over the years since I've been racing for so long. But all in all, over the last decade or so, the results are pretty accurate. But what's neat about it is being able to go back in that journey and look at how far you've come. And that always reminds me, I love going back and looking at that resume every 6 months, at least annually, to see how far I've come. And one of my favorite things to look at was the journey it took me from 2011 when I entered my first USA Cycling National Championship for track, having started my track journey in 2009, 2010, and jumping into my first national championship because it was at my home track, Trexler Town. And as high as that cost, as I mentioned before, was as far as time and distance, 3.5 hours away from the family and doing all these other things, it was the closest and my first chance of being able to participate in something like that. And I credit my friend, again, Mike Dansell, for giving me arguably some of the best advice I've ever been given, especially as it pertains to embracing being an amateur, was to, if you're going to attempt something grand like your first national championship, to do it when you're not ready, when you are not a contender, because this is the time to learn the simple things, the logistics aspect of it, of preparing for something like that, how much to eat, when to use the bathroom, simple things like that, tapering your training, all these things. And the idea is you learn these things when you're not ready, when you're not a contender, because when the time comes, hopefully, and you are a contender, you will have worked out all these kinks well in advance. And anyone that asks me if that's one of them that wants to attempt something grand or wants to attempt of raising the bar higher is to do exactly what I did. And the advice that Mike gave me was to try it when you're not ready. Don't go and don't have this paralysis of, oh, I'm not ready. You're never going to be truly ready. It's just better to be more ready than not ready. And again, back to that race resume, when I look back at that 2011 result of my national championship, my only goal that year was to not finish dead last. I finished second to dead last. So I accomplished my goal. And that was the 1,000 meter time trial, or the kilo, as we like to call it. And why that's so pertinent is that I figured my best shot of ever winning a national championship, not that I was ever going to, but my best shot was going to be in a match sprint, because I didn't have natural ability. I didn't have a tremendous amount of strength, but I did have good racecraft. I did have good race instincts. But that said, why I love looking back at that 2011 result is I felt for sure I would never, ever, ever, ever win a time trial. And why that resonates with me so much today, over a decade later, is the first time I actually won a national championship. It was in a time trial. And that goes to show you of all that preparation, all that embracing being an amateur, all that long journey of mine yielded 10 years later my first national championship. And it was in an event that I thought I could never, ever, ever win. And it turns out I won that 500 meter time trial, and have won it now 4 years in a row. Yeah. And if I didn't embrace being an amateur, I'm almost certain it would have taken me a lot longer than 10 years to achieve that goal, and probably not at all to be able to achieve that. And that's the gratitude I have of accepting and adopting that mentality of knowing I didn't know anything about what I was doing, but I was willing to learn, and I was willing to learn from the very bottom because I knew how much there was to learn. And here's the thing is if you take that mentality and that approach of knowing you have a lot to learn, that actually gives you space to absorb a lot of information. And after you absorbed all of that information, is learning your own techniques and developing your own ways of doing things. And it's things like my standing start technique that I adapted and learned from other people, and I think perfected, is what helped me grow even more beyond beyond the point of me being an amateur and transitioning into a expert in the subject matter. And that's what allowed me to take that next step and go beyond the national championships and enter into the world championship level. And then I took the same principles that I had when I started going into the US national championships, as far as going when I wasn't ready. And that was 2017, and that was one of the most biggest developmental benefits I ever had in this journey of embracing being an amateur. Going in there as a complete nobody and learning the craft of racing in a world championship. And if I didn't go in that year in 2017, I would have regretted that. I know I would have regretted that, because I didn't return to the world championships until 2022. And I was grateful, because that experience in 2017 of making myself uncomfortable and becoming a better athlete as a result. So when I did come back in 2021 or 22, I was able to go from mid-pack in 2017 on an individual level to being on the podium and getting the bronze medal with a solid time in a time trial. And had I thought that, oh, I wasn't ready in 2017, I shouldn't go, I would have gone in 2022 thinking, oh, I'm ready. I'm a US champion for the last 2 years in this event. I'm ready. But what if I didn't learn some of the lessons I learned in 2017 and had to learn them in 22? I'm grateful to have gone when I was a quote-unquote amateur. The bottom line is, you're never ready enough. You can always be more prepared, but at a certain point you have to draw the line. And that said, that's the beauty of being an amateur and being someone who's learning from the bottom up, is that you were never ready to begin with, and everything from there is just gravy, and it's just an opportunity to learn, even when you're an expert in a subject matter like I am now. And I'm not even an expert in subject matter, but people look at me as one because I have so much experience. But the main thing is, there's always opportunity to learn. And that's the beauty of life, is it's a never-ending process of learning. So you got to embrace it. So if you ever want to take on a huge challenge in your life, take it from the perspective of being an amateur. Learn from the very bottom all the way to the top. And hopefully, if you're lucky and you work hard enough, you will reach the top.